Yeah.
That way I could include the actual link to the live.
Right. Okay, welcome y'all. We are streaming live this evening on YouTube. So if you're not watching us on YouTube, I don't understand how you're watching us at all. But here we are. It is Wednesday, the 5th of April, 2023. And this is the International Live Stream of Mystery Show. I'm Bearhart and also Bill Wyman. And apparently this evening, I'm also Dave Bowman. I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
No, wait, that's my line.
Oh, yeah, it is. We have Kirsten Hal 9000. Go ahead, say it.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
There you go.
Pretty good.
So I'll just be floating around.
Floating into the abyss of space.
I'll have to go in through the airlock. And we also have Rikitty.
Meow.
Say meow, Rikitty.
Meow, Rikitty.
And you know, this evening, I'm going to give you all just a very brief physics lesson, because I'm not like a physicist or anything, and you know, most of the math involved in all of this is like a little beyond my pay grade. You know, when we talk about the future, and you know, we have like science fiction movies. They've always got flying cars, right? There's always flying cars. And the flying cars that you see in these things are, generally speaking, you know, because we always think, oh, you know, it's the 21st century. Where's my flying car? I say this all the time. It's like a little joke that I say, but I actually understand why we don't have flying cars and why we will never have flying cars, at least not as we would expect to have them in, you know, from what we see in the science fiction movies and such. I mean, it's a cute concept. You know, you see the cars, like somebody gets in their car in the driveway and, you know, flies away. So I want to start out with definitions, because it certainly possible and likely even that we will have flying vehicles that you know, are more or less personal vehicles, but they will not park in our driveway. And I mean, you know, as it is today, I mean, you can buy a small airplane for not much more than you would pay for a car, you know, maybe what you would pay for a very fancy car. But you got to keep it at the airport, and you got to fly, you got to get a pilot's license, you got to fly according to FAA rules, you know. So I'm going to define what I mean by flying cars when I say that we will never have flying cars. Kristen sneaks a sip, you know, and I don't have my bottle of water here, so I don't know what I'm going to do when my throat goes dry. I may have
When you said throat, it sounded like throw up.
Pardon me?
My throat goes dry.
It may already be happening.
No, I'm researching to make sure that I remember Newton's 3 laws of motion.
Well, I'm going to cover that, but okay. Yeah, I'm going to cover that. First, we're going to define what I mean by a flying car when I say that you're never going to have a flying car. So a car, when we think of a car, we think of a personal vehicle. We think of a vehicle that we, you know, park in our garage or park in our, you know, parking space at the condo or at the apartments, or, you know, park in our front driveway or whatever. You know, it's a personal car that we park in our home, and we drive it to work, and we drop the kids off at school. And if you ever saw the Jetsons, which is one of my favorite ever TV shows, you know, in the opening scenes, they show they show the mom, you know, dropping off the kids at school, and she's driving the flying car, right? And it's just like this little pod, and it goes, you know, and you know, she gives the kid their lunch and kisses them on the forehead, and a thing comes in and drops them off at the school. It's like hilarious. But, when I talk about a flying car, I'm talking about a personal vehicle. And by flying, so this is the scientist in me. I want to have really clear definitions before I explain, whether or not or how not, I'm going to do something. So I'm going to say what I mean by a flying car. By flying, it operates in terms of flight. The operator of the vehicle will control pitch, roll, yaw, acceleration. But because it's so you don't know what that is. Okay.
I don't know what any of that is. And my father-in-law is a legitimate pilot and flight instructor. So
the pitch is this. When you pitch, the pitch is up, then
okay.
then it's going to go up, and when the pitch is down, it's going to right. Roll is this.
Okay.
Yaw is this.
Okay, that was the only one that I was genuinely confused about.
Well, the vehicle operates in 3 dimensions because it's in the sky. Now, an automobile also has these things. You don't control them in the same way. When you decelerate, the nose will dip, right? When you put the brakes on, the nose will dip a little bit. That's pitch, right? And if you go around a corner too fast, it'll yaw a little bit, right? And if you're in an accident and your frame gets the frame of the car gets tweaked and the alignment is never on, you might drive down the road, right?
A little cattywampus.
In the yaw direction. So those are the 3 directions. And of course, you also control some form of thrust, acceleration, deceleration, those kinds of things. But because it's a car and not an airplane or a glider or anything like that, it doesn't have wings. So my definition of a flying car is a vehicle that more or less looks and acts like a car, but flies, and it flies it doesn't have wings. So some people have suggested that they could be like quadcopters, with or octocopter, with the little propellers. People have suggested that they could have, little low power rockets underneath them to lift them up and to propel them. Whatever it is, it's not going to be wings, because wings for a vehicle that's of that size, the wings would be, I don't know, 25, 30 wingspan, and you're not going to be able to park this thing in your garage. So my definition of, at least our working definition of a flying car that you will never have, means that it's not an airplane. It's a car.
But an airplane still uses wind, and so I remember you mentioning this previously about the only way that we know how to do flying is with propellers, with wind,
yeah. So we'll get to that start part. We're still in the definitions, but we're going to get to that. All right. And the other qualification is that it must be drivable by a typical civilian operator without a whole lot of specialized training. And so whatever training is involved will be not much more rigorous than what we have today for getting a driver license for driving a car. And the rules of the road will not be much more complicated than they are for 2-dimensional driving as we have today, except in 3 dimensions. So you might have, one additional dimension of controls, like, you have rules for when you change lanes this way. Well, you may also have rules for when you change lanes that way, right? So in addition to your right turn, left turn signals, you might also need to have up and down turn signals and mirrors and things like that. So that's my definition. Now, in terms of, how, there have been a lot of ideas of how, something like this would be propelled. if you have a regular winged aircraft, then it's operating on the principles of a wing, right? You need to have enough velocity in order for the wings to catch enough air to be able to use the pressure differential above and below the wing to lift the so I don't know if you know how wings work, but that's what they do. They cut through the air, they create a pocket of vacuum under the wing, and that lifts the wing. And that's how we fly in winged aircraft. They also have what are called rotary winged aircraft, which are what we colloquially call helicopters. And a helicopter is simply, instead of having the wings out here, it's got the wings on a rotor, but they're still wings. And if you look at them, when they're still, they have those same characteristics of a wing. And the velocity that catches the air, instead of it being from the airplane, moving forward, it's from the wings rotating and lifting it that way. So, but a flying car is not going to work like that. Although there have been proposals that it would be like a helicopter. And this is where we get into Newton's 3 laws. All right. So Newton's 3 laws of motion. Yes, please, Ms. Hallenthausen.
I was going to go first law, like I was just going to follow along, like first law of motion.
First law of motion.
Exits this way, follow the blinking lights.
Right. So Newton's first law says that a body at rest tends to remain at rest, a body in motion tends to remain in motion. It's what we might call inertia. Although, strictly speaking, inertia is like a corollary law. But if my flying car is parked in the driveway, it's not going to just get up and run away on its own without some intervention from an outside force. And that is Newton's second law. When a body is acted upon by a force, the change of motion is proportional to the force. In other words, if I come along and smack my phone, which I'm not going to do because phones are expensive these days, right? What would happen? The phone would go off this way, right? And that's Newton's second law. When a body is acted upon on a force, by a force, the change of motion is proportional to the force. In other words, it's going to be, the same. So this force is a certain amount of energy, and that same amount of energy is going to be transferred to the object that was smacked upon, and it will. Right. Which leads us to the third law, and they're all related. They're in this sequence on purpose. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction, and the mutual actions are always equal and directed in contrary paths, contrary parts. So, if I drop this phone on my hand, I feel that force on my hand, and you notice it pushes my hand down, and I have to exert force in the opposite direction to keep it in the picture frame, right? So in order to lift, if I want to lift this phone off the table, I have to exert force in the upward direction that is equal and opposite to the downward force caused by the gravitational pull of the mass of the phone, right? And so if you consider that a flying car has similar mass to a driving car, right? I mean, I got a pretty big car out in my garage. It's a Tesla Model X, and it weighs 2.5 tons.
Okay.
So that's like an SUV size car. You might have a smaller car, like a little sports car might weigh 1 ton. or even
Where
less.
does
That's
2.5 tons come from on that car, though?
Pardon me?
Where does 2.5 tons come from on that car?
It's the battery.
The motor? Okay.
It's the battery.
Okay.
It's
But
got to
if-
be a pretty big battery.
But if you've got like a Suburban, it's a similar amount of mass. It's a similar weight. But instead of the battery, it's got 40 gallons of fuel and a big ass V8 engine, right? Which is a whole bunch of iron. Oh, it's there now. Yes, Ms. Rickety.
Okay, my hand is not up for a comment. My hand is up because I have personal commentary and a question.
Yes.
So theoretically, like the movie Up, right? You've seen the movie Up, right? Where they tie a bunch of balloons to the house and the house floats. Theoretically, if you had 1,000,000 balloons, could you then tie it to a regular normal car, like maybe a lighter car, like a coupe or something? And then Prius, yes. And then when you want to descend, you just start popping balloons. Couldn't there be a mechanism to use helium to make a car float, but then it wouldn't be a flying car, or to just get it off the ground? And then when the downward pressure won't wreck your driveway, then you could use like outward and downward pressure. But just for that first lift off, couldn't you use something like helium?
Okay,
Explain to me why that's not possible.
I will explain, but first of all, I'm going to address the Prius question. A Prius is heavier than a similar sized gas car because it's got a big ass damn battery. Okay.
Oh, that's damn battery head.
So, and it's got an engine. I mean, both.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why my car only has the battery. It doesn't have the.
Yes, it does not. It does not also take gas. I think gas would kill your car.
Yeah, I think gas would kill my car. And besides, it's got no tailpipe. So,
Well,
Yeah.
and it's crazy to me that your car weighs 2 tons.
Yeah.
Because my husband drives a Dodge Ram 3500 diesel and it weighs 3 tons.
Right.
So like looking at his big ass damn truck compared to your electric vehicle, like the math ain't mathin' in my head.
Well, it's all just a matter of, what's involved in the mass. And I really want to address the helium question, but let's finish this subject. So the big old, I imagine this is like the biggest truck that Dodge makes, a 350, a 3500, whatever it is,
Yes.
it's a giant, it's got a big old V8 engine.
Yep.
Probably displaces, I don't know, 7 liters. And
We
that's
used to haul our 5th wheel. So if that tells you anything.
right. So, yeah, well, yeah. So that it's got a lot of iron. That engine is a massive amount of iron, plus I imagine that, I don't know how they take the weight with the gas tank empty or the gas tank full. I imagine that with the gas tank full, because they're using that weight for things like, how to determine what it's going to do to a bridge and such. So I don't know how big your gas tank is, but I'm imagining it's an American car, so it's probably in gallons. It's probably close to 40 gallons, right?
I would think so. I'd have to look up the current price of diesel and then do a little math, but
You bought it to tow a 5th wheel. You're going to need a lot of gas to do that. So, yeah, it's just, it's a whole lot of iron. It's probably, the wheelbase is probably a little bit longer than my Tesla, although my Tesla wheelbase is the same as a Hummer H2. Which I found interesting but it's a big ass car. Other people, when they drive it, they scrape the rims going around corners. So, yeah. So let's talk about the helium question. Let's say that you had enough balloons and enough helium to lift a 2-ton vehicle. Just stipulate that you have this massive amount of helium and this container that'll hold it, and a cable that'll pull enough weight, and rigs that'll keep it all balanced, and all of that. Let's just stipulate that you have all of that. When you're not lifting the car, what happens to all of this helium and apparatus? You can't put it in your garage because it'll lift the roof, right? And how do you attach it to the car without, getting flown away while you're doing it? You need to have something else nearby with even more mass than the vehicle to hold that thing down while you attach it to the car and let it go. And then once you let it go and you get it up in the air, and you're up in the air with your car, and you want to come down, what do? Release the helium? Then you need to have tanks and tanks full of helium in your garage in order to, Ms. Kirsten Robot.
Aren't we technically in a helium shortage? Like every time you go to like get balloons blown up for a party.
I remember hearing something about this, and but it could be that. And then of course you've got, what do you do with all this helium? Do you release it in the atmosphere? Is that going to create a problem? So there's some practicality problems with the lighter than air counterbalance the car kind of question. And that doesn't seem like a viable way to accomplish this.
Oh, well, we've tried every avenue.
Okay, so there have also been proposals, for things like retractable wings. And if you want to have retractable wings and you want to fit that into our definition of car, which the definition I gave earlier probably does not include retractable wings, but let's say, that you want to have retractable wings. The wings would need to be large enough. So when they're retracted, they're going to need to stow somewhere within the vehicle. They're going to need to displace that amount of space within the vehicle. And even assuming that you could solve all of those problems, you need a runway, right? And
To strut your stuff.
Well, yeah, exactly. To be able to build up enough speed for the air to catch the wings, to when you take off even in a small plane, you need a significant amount of runway. You need like, a quarter mile even for a small plane. So are you going to have your street that your house is on is going to have to be super wide and super long with no cars parked along it and nobody else taking off at the same time in the opposite direction. And no, cross traffic, you got all these problems that you have at an airport. You already have those issues, but an airport is built on enough space and with enough rules to be able to accommodate that. So the retractable wings solution is probably not, a solution that will fit the personal vehicle that you can park in your garage or in your driveway, kind of a solution. So we have this problem that you have a vehicle that weighs a couple of tons, or maybe even just 1 ton, but a couple of tons, especially once you put several people of my size inside of it, then you need to get this thing off the ground, which
Right.
means you need as much force pushing up as there is pushing down. And what is the amount of force? Well, okay, you need 2 tons of force pushing in the opposite. I mean, if we were to call it, now we're working in different kinds of units, but you would need enough force. How much force does it take to lift a 2,000-pound vehicle, quarter mile up in the air? That's that becomes the problem. So if you have any sort of, well, anything that's going to push that much down is going to flatten anything under it, right? What happens if you drop a 2-ton car on a house?
Everyone is dead, straight to jail.
Exactly. Now,
What if it was automated?
well, that's the thing. In order to lift that car up, you need that much force going down. And the minute it flies over your house or your trees or your neighbor's dog, it's going to be as if you dropped, it's going to have the same amount of force as if you dropped a 2,000 pound, a 2-ton thing, right? Because a ton is 2,000 pounds, at least in imperial measurements.
How dare they?
It's going to be as if you dropped a 2-ton boulder on this, whatever it is, house, driveway, bushes, neighbor's dog, trees, all that stuff is flattened the minute you take off in your whatever propulsion means it is, whatever thrust means it is that you use to lift this thing off the ground. Newton's third law, there has to be that much downward thrust in order to lift the thing up, right? Equal and opposite. And I mean, not to even mention, what if somebody is flying by above you and, it's like, you see, this is the other part of the problem. We always imagine that there's like lanes in the air, right? Let's assume that you figured out how to get off the ground without destroying everybody in your neighborhood. Now you're flying around up in the air. I'm going to really need some water here in a minute. Now you're flying around in the air and you've got traffic going this way and traffic going this way. Okay. What happens at this moment? This thing is pushing down with all those tons of force, and this thing's just going to be thrown down and smashed into the ground. You're not going to be able to do that. So,
well, and that's what I've been thinking about is like, what kind of license would you need to have? Because, like to drive the, 18 wheelers, you need like a CDL, or like the buses.
CDL is commercial driver's license. Yeah.
So you need a freaking pilot's license to drive a flying car?
Well, yes, you're going to need to understand, and I see the hand, Rickety. You're going to need to understand how to take off safely, how to land safely, and how to pilot the aircraft in the air safely. And there's no way around that. Now, a lot of that could be automated. And I think, AI will get to the point in the next couple of decades where enough of that would be automated that your average person would be able to get, to safely pilot a single occupant or, family-sized occupants vehicle. Maybe not an airliner, because an airliner, they're going to need to know how to take over when the software fails or, whatever. But I think for a small, but I mean, we already have a difference between a recreational pilot's license and a, I don't know what they call it, and a commercial pilot's license, which is very, very different. And you can go and you can take it's a months-long course. It'd probably take you a year to get a small craft pilot's license, but you can do that and, fly like a little Piper or whatever it is that they fly. I took some courses when I was younger. I never finished because I didn't have the resources and I didn't really have the desire. I got to the point where I could take off and I could land and it was fun. And I went on to other things.
Just in the simulator, right?
No. I flew in a small, it was a small single propeller. I think it was a Piper. It was like, this is so long ago. This is
Still a whole ass airplane.
This is in the 70s out at Van Nuys Airport in Southern California. And I took a few lessons. I got to the point where I could take off and land, with the instructor sitting there next to me. But it was fun, and I would, but I have like some of an idea of what it takes to be able to do that. And yeah, you can learn to do it, but you're not going to learn to do it in a weekend like you can with a car. Have your dad take you out in the parking lot, have you crash into some orange cones or something, and then go take your written, and then you take your driving, and you got the little old lady with the blue hair like sitting there going,
Yep.
right.
Did I already tell you my getting my driver's license story? 'Cause it sounds very similar.
I recently, when our oldest teenager got their driver's license, I had the entire family, including me, take defensive driving classes. Because it just, I took it when I was young,
I
and
only had to do that when I got a speeding ticket.
no,
and
not
driving.
yeah, no, defensive driving is like a whole thing. Okay, now I see the hand again, Rickety.
Okay. So I'm going to say right now that I believe flying cars will be a thing in the future. How? Why? Even with all of those physics that you've just described and how it's literally not possible in the world of physics. Metaverse. The metaverse. I think there will be flying cars because people have wanted that for so long that there's going to be some sort of simulator and some sort of simulation where the feeling of being in a flying car is it feels real. And maybe I'm just chasing my dreams here and I'm just chasing a pipe dream, or maybe I'm just, and if you don't believe me, you're too jaded. So I think that will be a thing because people have always wanted to know what it's like to be in a flying car. So I think someone's going to create that in a simulation. So I think they will exist.
You can already do that. I mean, Microsoft has had Flight Simulator on the Windows PCs forever, and it's supposedly very, very realistic. And I imagine that as it is today in the Oculus or Facebook or Meta or whatever they call it now, the headsets, that you can do something like that. I imagine that you can, but I'll tell you from my perspective, if we're going to be violating the laws of physics and rewriting and coming up with a whole new set of laws of physics, which, I mean, we don't know how to do that today, but maybe 500 years from now, we will figure out how to do that. I don't know.
Or maybe sooner with the use of these kinds of like AI or simulation or augmented reality style. I mean,
I don't know.
I never want to say anything is impossible because you're right. Maybe it'll be sooner with all of these supplemental technologies that are currently coming out.
Newton's third law appears pretty immutable. I think it's pretty much, I don't see us getting around that anytime in the foreseeable future. But in any event, if we were to be able to do that, and if we were to be able to figure out how to circumvent these seemingly insurmountable obstacles, I don't want a flying car. I want a transporter.
That's what I was thinking too.
I mean, I want to be able to, tap the badge on my shoulder and instantly be in, I don't know, Paris or
Yep.
Finland or, someplace cool.
I've
Certainly,
always wanted to apparate. I think that was the word in Harry Potter, where they just like snap and twist or whatever, turn in a circle, and then they are across the world. Like, I've always thought that was so cool.
yeah. I mean, if I were going to find a way to circumvent the laws of physics, it would be that one. But I don't know. Flying cars always look cool in the movies, and the other one. My favorite flying car is the taxi that Bruce Willis drove in The Fifth Element.
Yep.
That was just that seemed like the most fun. And but still, and they had the old Chinese guy on the rickety boat that delivered Chinese food to his apartment. But the laws of physics as we understand them today simply do not allow for that. Another thing from Star Trek that they have is artificial gravity. I mean, that would be pretty cool too.
That would.
To be able to just, turn off the laws of gravity in my house, float around for a while.
Like on the moon, once Artemis gets there and they get to like explore it a little bit, do you think that they would be able to duplicate that experience here on Earth?
No, I mean, not stationary. I mean, you can already, they have this airplane. What they do is they fly you really, really high, and then they drop in a controlled drop, which is equivalent to the acceleration of gravity, so that you have the feeling of being weightless. They call it the vomit comet. So
sign me up.
But not stationary. Kitty.
Okay. So I learned this today and I found it fascinating. So I will share this with you guys. So I think you'll appreciate it too. But did you know that out of the 12 humans that have ever stepped foot on the moon or been to the moon, all 12 of them had an allergic reaction to the moon dust? So as we talked about earlier, I think yesterday, we won't be able to colonize the moon anytime soon, especially because everyone's literally allergic to moon dust because it is the particles are so hard and like glass-like shards. There's nothing to soften it.
It's not so much an allergy as it is just an adverse reaction to the,
Right. The symptoms were, quote, allergy-like.
Yeah. That's not surprising. I mean, I don't know. I don't remember what the, I probably knew at one time, but I don't remember what the makeup is of the, the elements of the moon dust. But that, yeah. So that's definitely a thing.
Yep. Also, I think flying cars could work and still pass the laws of physics if someone first invented a shrink ray, because then you could shrink the flying car so that the force needed to lift it up. There you go. You could, I mean, and then there's a bunch of tiny little mini cars flying around everywhere, but I mean, that's like insects. And if all of those systems are automated and it's a virtual driver.
You don't want
to. It's giving Honey, we shrunk ourselves, and Honey, we shrunk the kids.
And the flying car. And Honey, we shrunk the flying car.
My argument about why shrinking people down to very tiny size would also never work.
Are you going to debunk Ant-Man? Let me have my fantasy.
No. What is that movie where they downsizing?
Oh, I love that movie.
I love that movie.
That was actually like a sweet little love story.
It was. And then it also was like very real. It wasn't just like, hey, everybody shrink themselves and everything is fine. Like it just shows.
What good science fiction does is it addressed all of the moral implications.
Yep.
And the societal implications. But what it did not address is the relative size of an oxygen molecule.
That's true. That's
true. Intaking too much oxygen.
You're going to be trying to breathe these oxygen molecules that are as big as your head.
We just take short.
Exactly. Very short.
You shrink the oxygen molecules too, and then you have a breathing tube.
Clearly, we still need to do a little more thinking about it.
We are science fiction experts, so
yep, there is no limit to my creativity when it comes to the need for flying cars.
My favorite science fiction
is on the fiction.
My favorite science fiction is stuff like The Expanse, where there is a little bit of hand wavium involved, but not very much. When they talk about traveling through the solar system, They keep their acceleration at a certain rate so that it simulates a certain amount of gravity. You know, they got the physics right for the vast majority of it. They put a lot of thought into that. And that's my favorite kind of science fiction. I tried to do the same thing in my little sci-fi story that you guys read.
When is that being released?
Did we, how are we doing on viewership, Kitty?
Maxed out at 6.5, but here's what's crazy. Here's what's cool. Out of the 5 people watching now, we have 5 likes on our video. So the engagement rate is 100%, which I have personally never seen before. So that's really cool.
I guess people like that we're talking about something fun and something sciencey.
Yes, I put us under the category science and technology. And remember, too, the biggest viewership for us happens the morning after we release this. So by like 6:42 a.m. tomorrow morning PST, I'll
Because
probably go up by a lot.
To watch it after.
Are you Bill Nye the Science Guy?
You need to change your name to that sometime.
The Science Guy. Bill.
I like that he wears a bow tie. You know, I like that he you know, tries to engage with young people about science. I really like that about him. I also like Neil deGrasse Tyson, but for different reasons. Somebody had him on their show at some point, and I don't remember what it was, but he was you know, they were trying to argue with him about, I don't know, vaccines or something. And he, like, you know, laid it out, the science, and then he took his microphone and dropped it. And, you know, he brings cool to science, whereas Bill Nye brings the science to the kids. And I appreciate both of those things. I
remember, at least in like Ricky and I's generation, you knew it was going to be a good day in science when they wheeled out.
Oh, yep. The TV
with the VHS.
Oh, with the VHS.
First word was Bill Nye, the Science Guy. Bill. And so I was we always talk about our days at dinner time, and the boys are like, who wants to talk about their day at school? And they'll be like, me. And my youngest, who's in kindergarten, it's 2023, and he's in kindergarten. And he was like, today we got to watch Bill Nye the Science Guy. And I was like, you're lying. Your teacher set you up to punk me right now. And he was like, no, we watched Bill Nye the Science Guy. And so it's just like a very...
Bill Nye is still a thing.
Yeah, it's like a full circle moment that he's still relevant and still in classrooms today.
Well, he's like my age, so we didn't have him when I was a kid. But what we had, you know, because you guys, they wheeled in a cart with, like, I guess, a TV screen and a VHS.
Yeah.
They wheeled in a cart with a projector.
Love it.
And they would bring down the screen. They had a screen hanging above the chalkboard. And they would, you know, close the book. You know, see a movie about cars crashing or something. You know, it was never very much fun, but it was nice because it was a change of pace. They turned off the lights so we could, you know, make rude signs from the back of the room. And as I got older, I was, you know, in the AV club, and so I got to operate the film projector, and, you know, but
AV club was always the people you wanted to be in association with. 100%.
Because we were treated like outcasts. So I don't know where you went to school. Because we were the geeky kids, you know, and nobody we never got picked for a team or anything like that.
Oh no,
I like to think that the nerdy kids are the lame ones trope kind of fizzled out by the late 90s, early 2000s. By like 2005, it was done. Like, the nerdy kids were pretty cool at my school.
2005, you were still in school in 2005, weren't you? So that was, that was like 8 years ago. And
that was almost 20 years ago. That was 18 years
yeah.
Quick maths. We never said it was accurate.
You were not in school 18 years ago, or were you? You were just like getting started in school.
Me? I was in school 18 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not as young as you think we are. We're young, but we're not that young.
Well, yeah.
I got gray hairs a sprouting, okay?
I don't have any on the top of my head. They just go away instead of turning gray. The gray
I
all
could
stops over here. And this is all, just as well, it's thinned out on the top. But
Oh,
yeah.
well, Kirsten, it's a shame you can't use just for men.
I
They
know.
prohibit you, and it's
Thought
so
about it.
mean. Can't
Thought
use just for
about
men.
it.
Yeah, Rose has more gray hairs on her head than I do.
I can't believe you would call her out like that. I'm texting her.
Ah, there you go. Well, yeah, she doesn't show it. In any event, that's all I got on flying cars. So if somebody's trying to sell you a flying car or sell you flying car futures, I recommend that you do not buy. I mean, I'm not licensed to give you financial advice, but I can tell you that in my view, if they're trying to sell you flying cars, you're going to lose your money. It's a scam. Anyway, that's what we got for you today. I'm still hard at work on my Python course. I really do expect to have it live within the next month. I think is a pretty reasonable expectation. We'll see how many other things conspire to slow me down, but yeah,
Mostly me and Ricky.
yeah, it's mostly the kids here.
Blame us. It's me. Hi. We're the problem. It's us.
Anyway, we'll see y'all again tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock Pacific time from fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm Bearheart.
I'm Kirsten.
And that
Meow,
is
meow, meow. Meow, 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 meow.
love y'all.